Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldron. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, May 15th, 2018. Class outside again today because what happened? The air conditioner guy didn't show up. I didn't make the phone call yesterday. My wife did, but she assured me that, I had her assurance because I heard her say, really? Today? Awesome. So they were pretty clear about their coming yesterday, but I called them. It didn't show. It was about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Called them up. Hey, so any news? Oh, yeah, you're on the list tomorrow. Oh, did it get late and you got real busy and you pushed it back to tomorrow, or was it always supposed to be tomorrow? Oh, no, we scheduled it for tomorrow. So a warm evening, to say the least. And again, class outside today as the windows still wide open. We may have to close them in the middle of the show. We may have to close the show in the middle of the show if they decide that now is the time to show up. Of course, we absolutely asked for after 11 o'clock, but you know how it is. It's, I'm sure, one of the busiest days of the year for air conditioning guys, but that's not really supposed to be the top news of the day. Of course, the possibility of eventually having to simply arrest the President of the United States was never supposed to be the top news of the day, but it might be there today. Bill in Portland, Maine, overbills the show, I think, here. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Is this the day Trump gets arrested? Only Kagro X knows for sure. So you have to listen. You might as well listen. I can tell you it is unlikely that today is the day. I am busy. I've got a lot to do, and I have to wait for the air conditioning guy. So it won't be me placing the president under arrest. Let's see. The top news, of course, in Washington, D.C., the president visited Melania in the hospital yesterday, which, of course, tied up the Beltway during rush hour traffic. That was fantastic of him to do. I understand there's no winning, of course. If you're the president of the United States, even if you are a dotard and you suck like Donald Trump does, there's just no winning. He flew to Walter Reed Hospital via helicopter, and you might say on the one hand at first, well, come on. You're leaving Washington, D.C., and you're going to Washington, D.C. Why don't you just drive to the hospital? He did, and then we had these horrific storms in the area, and they couldn't fly the helicopter back, so he had to drive back, and that meant closing the Beltway like mid-rush hour, and you can't win for doing that either, but that's okay. We were going to criticize him either way, and it hardly even matters. Let's see. Brian Monroe. Yes, Brian asks whether today he can try and guess the model of weed whacker. I think the weed whacking in our area is done, but whack whatever you want. That's what I say. That's the motto of the show. I think it should not be the motto of the show. By the way, that reminds me, because of my prurience, here's a stupid story. This is not a story at all. Anybody out there have DirecTV? Let's complain about DirecTV. Here's the thing. Service, it's fine. I don't mind it. Nothing like that. I'm flipping through the guide, and I go to the movie channels, because movies, that's what you want to watch. And I've never actually done this. You get down to the end of the movies, and I know the last movie channel that's listed is Sundance, regular movie channels, because then after that is the X-rated channels. And the first couple of them are channels that just are like, I don't know, whatever. It's like Playboy TV or something. And so in the previews, this is really off the topic, right? Well, maybe not. I mean, the president has slept with all these people. So what am I talking about? Of course it's in the news. Anyway, the first couple channels there are kind of generic Playboy type channels, and it just says, adult entertainment, yada, yada. And some of them, I always found this kind of funny, like motels that you can rent for the hour. You can buy pay-per-view channels for an hour or two or 15 minutes, depending, I guess. I don't know which ones do what, but I don't know what the packages are. But that's my signal that I've come to the end of the movie section, at which point I then say, all right, let me go look through some of the other channels where there might be some movies in the 200s, where they show movies all the time. But I flipped on and I thought, okay, well, first of all, the volume was too low. So I went or the volume was too high. And I went to turn down the volume, and I hit the wrong button, and I hit the channel down, but that pushes the guide down. So I got the next page of X-rated channels, and I mean, it's a good thing. Like for the adult channels, they don't just play them, right? You got one, they want to make money out of them, and two, I guess they're a little bit concerned. Hey, what if kids just flip by these channels? Although I guess if you subscribe to it, whatever, you got to lock the TV. We don't have anything worth locking the TV over. So anyway, I flipped down a page, and do you know that when you get down further, they put like actual, well, I mean, I guess the descriptions you would write up, I don't know whether they have anybody who writes them specifically for DirecTV or whether they just take what's on the, back in the old days when it was on videotape, you could write the description that's on the video, I guess, and put that in the guide. I don't know where the description, where the content comes from, but for one thing, it's pretty porny, and for another, I mean, like, I don't know whether kids, at this point, there's no reason for kids to look at the wording about porn movies on DirecTV channels for any thrills. I guess you just turn on the internet, pick up your iPhone, whatever, and, if it's not properly firewalled and safeguarded, then I guess you can get whatever the hell you might be interested in on the internet, and there's no worries about it. But I'm flipping through this thing, and it's describing porn movies, which there's ways to do it, I guess, and you just say, the generalized theme of this porn movie is, whatever. It's Donald Trump, a guy in a Donald Trump wig cheats on his wife with 400 porn stars. Whatever. That's a description of a movie. No. This is like X-rated descriptions of X-rated movies, which stands to reason, except that you shouldn't put it on the channel guide. Kids could be looking for cartoons. They don't know what they're, Mom, what's a, who knows what I don't think I could read it to you. I mean, we're not on anybody else's radio air these days, but it's uncomfortable to read those descriptions aloud with an audience around, which is why I do this show alone and in the house. Anyway, so that's my complaint, my consumer complaint for the day. Can't they just be like adult content? And how much do you need to know about Bazonga's 19? Right? I mean, that's the name of the show. It's about, life on the frontier. Come on. But do we really have to say, and whatever. You should read it. If you have DirecTV and you want to laugh, go and take a look. Just make sure your kids aren't around. Okay, the actual top of the news today is the president is a traitor. And he hates China, but, and that has nothing to do with what I was watching on TV. But now he loves them, and we can't figure this one out. One side note, why don't we just stop everything and let the warlock know? Are we still on Stitcher? Yes, allegedly. I have not checked in many years, but no one has told me we're not on Stitcher anymore. I believe we are. And I think they still broadcast it live on Stitcher as well, but certainly the podcast is there. Or somebody's downloading something that they think is our show. That much I can tell you. I do love that throwaway line from Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is a traitor and has sold us out to China. And we will catch up on that story. And no one can believe it because there's no really good explanation for what is driving it other than he's like on the take or is completely confused about what he's doing. The basics of the story, I think we mentioned the other day, but we didn't really get in depth on the fact that he has announced the reversal of, I'll grab the Huffington Post or whatever they call it now, Huff Post story about this because I think it juxtaposes all the right pieces. You already know what the pieces are, but let's put the dry toast version of it out there, and we'll all contemplate it from here on in. S.V. Date is the writer for this one for HuffPost. Trump orders help for Chinese phone maker after China approves money for Trump project. That gets right to the heart of the matter. But I assume that we'll be discussing just how junky this ZTE stuff is somewhere along the line. Here's the subheader. I'm going to give you every word of today's article. Trump will profit from Indonesian resort project that will get $500 million in Chinese loans in a deal sealed days before his tweet ordering help for ZTE. All right, here's the deal. A mere 72 hours after the Chinese government agreed to put $500 million into an Indonesian project that will personally enrich Donald Trump, the president ordered a bailout for a Chinese government-owned cell phone maker. And here's what he tweeted. President Xi of China and I are working together to give massive Chinese phone company ZTE a way to get back into business fast. Trump announced on Twitter Sunday morning, too many jobs in China lost. Commerce Department has been instructed to get it done. Now, we'll just pause for a moment to say, one, too many jobs in China lost. Who cares? That's not my interest. Two, that's not your interest. Three, that's not anybody else's interest except the Chinese, and they're on their own. It's practically should be a goal of the American government to lose jobs in China, but you don't want to make it an overt one because then they'll take it out on you, rightly so. You don't say these things out loud. I do, but I'm not the president. But if I became president, I would not be a dotard, and I would not say those things out loud. So who cares about jobs lost in China? And two, well, you know this, and the article will explain it. But long story short, in case, I don't know, the air conditioning guy comes, ZTE, many problems with ZTE. Chief among them, well, it's a tie. Two chief problems. One, they are serial violators of the embargo, the trade sanctions against Iran. And oh my goodness, do we hate Iran, right? I mean, okay. But you know how Donald Trump is about that. He just trashed the Iran deal as, a horrible deal, too stupid, et cetera, et cetera. But part of the bargain and part of the thing that got them to the table to sign the deal in the first place was these sanctions. One of which was, of course, that we wouldn't be doing business with companies that violated those sanctions or did business and sold strategic supplies or anything else to Iran, and ZTE did that. Secondly, they did so with American components. They bought plenty of American components. And why he didn't say too many jobs in America threatened if we don't sell the components to ZTE, I have no idea. Maybe he meant to, but he's a dotard. And anyway, we sell, or we used to sell, American parts to ZTE for them to make their phones. And they then went on, of course, to sell them in Iran, which is a problem. And two, as I understand it, if my skimming of everything has been correct, and why bother reading the article? I say the Chinese government, of course, owns the cell phone making company ZTE, so it's it's not a difficult thing to do to then say, okay, Chinese government owned phone company, why don't you build your phones such that we can use them to spy on whoever uses them? We can turn on the microphones, turn on the cameras, all surreptitiously without letting the phone owner know that we're doing it. And let's say all of that stuff feeds directly back to the intelligence community here in China. So, do you want, say, American government officials carrying around ZTE phones? No, you don't. And so you ban that from happening because the phone maker owned by the Chinese government is using it to spy on anyone dumb enough to buy a ZTE phone. Plus, they're doing business with Iran. Two good reasons not to give a goddamn one way or the other whether jobs are lost in China over ZTE having problems. But not Donald Trump. He told you he hated China. He told you no one was going to be tougher on the Chinese than me and the Russians and all things. Anything that needs to be toughed on, I will tough on it. Better than anybody. That I can tell you. Believe me. Until Of course, he has cake with President Xi, and then he's his friend. And P.S., as the Trump Post article on Trump continues, Trump did not mention in that tweet or its follow-ups that on Thursday, the developer of a theme park outside Jakarta had signed a deal to receive as much as $500 million in Chinese government loans, as well as another $500 million from Chinese banks. Trump's family business, the Trump Organization, has a deal to license the Trump name to the resort, which includes, of course, a golf course and hotels. Trump, despite his promises to do so during the campaign, has not divested himself of his businesses and continues to profit from them. You do a good deal for him, he does a good deal for you. Quid pro quo, said Richard Painter, the White House ethics lawyer for former President George W. Bush and now a Democratic candidate for Senate in Minnesota. How do you like that? Many people probably do not. This appears to be yet another violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, Painter said. Yeah, referring to the prohibition against the president receiving payments from foreign governments. In other words, as I said in the Morning Post today, it is precisely the nightmare scenario everyone envisioned with Donald Trump. It's the nightmare scenario everyone envisioned back in the day of the founding when they wrote the Emoluments Clause. Specifically today, we understood it to be very much in play for Donald Trump. And it's the nightmare scenario in that 1A, it's happening. 1A, it's happening. 2B, let's say, Donald Trump is a jerk and we hate him and we don't really want him to profit. But on top of all of that, even if you love him, you can't tell. This is the nightmare of this is you and I both know very well what's happening here. He's getting paid off by the Chinese government, and he's helping out a gigantic government-owned Chinese company that spies on everybody and does business with Iran because millions of dollars could flow into this project and lots of it could end up in his pocket. But can you prove it? And if you can't, if it was a normal person, of course, you'd be arrested and tried for this. And at some point they would say you did this quid pro quo, and you would come up with some lame excuse. I didn't know, or I couldn't be expected to understand that the government did this, that, or the other thing, or I would do this for any business, whether they invested in my hotels or not, whatever cockamamie excuse you could come up with. And there would be this moment where we realize, okay, we're in a court of law and this has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, etc. And we would understand, we might be outraged, but we could understand or piece together how you might come down with a not guilty verdict or a hung jury or something, right, that prevents justice from being done. But we'll never get there because, now there's a whole other additional level of excuses like, no, I'm separating policy from my personal. I don't run my businesses. My kids run my businesses. And that's garbage. But it's the sort of thing that courts and juries would spend weeks parsing and decide, I can't really tell and I'm just not sure. And one side says this and the other side says that and I don't know what to do. On top of which, the president has this prerogative to set foreign policy goals and national security, yada, yada. And there's a really great reason that doesn't violate our national sovereignty that I did this for. But you can't know it, and I can't tell you it, because it's a national security issue. It just has to be secret. You'll just have to trust me, Donald Trump, that it's all on the up and up. And that I'm not getting paid off, and that there's a great reason for America that I did this. And furthermore, you're not allowed to ask any more questions. This is the big nightmare scenario. It could be going on in front of our faces, and there would still be nothing we could do about it. So that's why the Emoluments Clause is in the Constitution, everybody. Too bad we don't give a crap. Or rather, I should be more specific. Too bad the Republican-controlled Congress doesn't give a crap, because they could do things about it, like say either you can't have that money, or you are under arrest, or you are not the president anymore, get out of here. And neither is your second-in-command thief, wackadoodle Mike Pence. And P.S., it's a Democratic Congress now, so the Speaker of the House is a Democrat. Boom. All right, fantasy, yes. But the Congress is supposed to do something. about preventing these kind of payments moving from foreign governments into the pocket of the president. And the president says, everybody in the government use ZTE phones because we don't care about anything. And wouldn't that be the irony of ironies? I can't tell you why I did this because national security. But I can tell you this, there's no more national security because we're all using ZTE phones. That's an issue, by the way, that came up. Not that it was a ZTE phone, but an issue that came up with malware on smartphones back in the day when notorious spy Mike Flynn was still on the staff, when Donald J. Trump was down at Mar-a-Lago, Perv-a-Lago to you and me, and dealing with the first of his North Korean missile crises when the Prime Minister of Japan, was he visiting, or was it President Xi who was visiting and he just thought he'd tell him what was going on in Japan? I think it was the Prime Minister of Japan who was visiting, and there was a missile test over in North Korea and a launch, and he was reading the briefing papers at the dinner table out on the patio at Perv-a-Lago, and Mike Flynn helpfully decided he would illuminate the document with the flashlight function on his cell phone, and I was alerted by several people that is very often a trigger for malware, or sometimes the malware is already running anyway, and your camera could be, if you have an unsecured personal phone that has enough malware on it, it could be every time you turn on the light or every time you turn on the phone, the camera goes on and the images are just piped straight to Beijing, and you would know nothing about it. And if you happen to be scanning, top secret documents about North Korea's missile launch that are in front of the President of the United States at that moment and streaming that to Beijing, that would be a pretty bad thing, unless you were, of course, an international spy, in which case it would be just doing my job, ma'am or sir, depending on who's asking. Now back to the HuffPost and SV Date, who knows what he's talking about, plus has a lawyer checking his copy. The White House did not respond to HuffPost queries asking if there was a connection between the MNC Lido City project, that's the Indonesia project, and Trump's directive regarding ZTE. At Monday's daily briefing, Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah referred questions about the Indonesian project to the Trump Organization. That's not something I can speak to, he said. And, of course, it's not somebody that you should be referring anybody to either, because the president is not supposed to have anything to do with those guys, and we all know that that's a lie. The Trump Organization on Monday acknowledged its involvement in the resort, but did not respond to questions about how much the company would make from its licensing or management fees. ZTE phones have already been described as a security risk by the U.S. military and intelligence community. 2 weeks ago, the military banned their use on bases for fear they could be used to track the locations of service members. The company, which is owned 33% by Chinese government-owned enterprises, has been fined $1.2 billion last year after it was found to be violating U.S. sanctions against Iran and North Korea. After it was determined that ZTE officials had lied about their actions, the U.S. government last month banned it from purchasing U.S. components for 7 years, a decision that essentially forced the company to shut down. Trump followed up late Monday afternoon with a new tweet on the issue. ZTE, the large Chinese phone company, and that's not to say that they make large phones, buys a big percentage of individual parts from U.S. companies. This doesn't sound like something he wrote. But this is also reflective of the larger trade deal we are negotiating with China and my personal relationship with President Xi. That part does sound like him. No one cares about your personal relationship with him, really, to be quite honest. But he thought he'd throw that one in there because I guess dumb people think that a president should sound like that. The new statement, however, still did not address the question of the Indonesian resort and the Trump Organization's coming profit thanks to the Chinese investment. This is stunning. They perpetually find new things to surprise me, said Robert Weissman, president of the open government advocacy group Pelican Citizen. I don't know. Public Citizen. You know the group. The idea of the president intervening in a law enforcement matter, And that's what it is. To satisfy a foreign government is extraordinary. And it's extraordinary because it doesn't happen. Opening that door threatens the integrity of all corporate law enforcement. Never mind the fact that he benefits from it personally. Shah, on other ZTE questions at the Daily Briefing, appeared to downplay the import of Trump's directive to, quote, get it done. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross will examine the matter consistent with applicable laws and regulations, Shah said. He acknowledged, however, that the issue is of great concern to the Chinese and its president, Xi Jinping. In our bilateral relationship, there is give and take, Shah said. That's not even a statement. It's in our bilateral relationship, there are two parties. So what? During his campaign, Trump attacked China, almost daily for, quote, stealing U.S. jobs by manipulating its currency and using unfair trade practices. No one has ever stolen jobs like other countries have taken from us, Trump told a Nevada rally on November 5th, 2016. Now, if it's a state taking jobs from another state, that wouldn't be people stealing jobs from the United States. It requires another country if you're going to steal jobs from the U.S. But that's some statement. No one has ever stolen jobs like other countries. Thank you. What a brilliant statement. He meant to say China, but for some reason he veered away. We've lost 70,000 factories since China joined the WTO, Trump told a Pittsburgh area audience the following day. That sounds like one of those statements that would end up being counted as a lie, because I doubt very much, 70,000 factories, I suppose. If you counted everything where they make something, I suppose you could possibly do it. In recent months, Trump has been trying to craft a trade agreement with China. At the same time, he's asking Xi's help in cracking down on North Korea because of its nuclear weapons program. But at least he's supposed to be asking for that, not payments for golf clubs in Indonesia. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with the Huffington Post or HuffPost coverage of what the hell is going on with China and ZTE, which occurs to me at the moment. I don't know. I had this one in pocket, and probably a smarter thing to do would have been to turn to the Daily Coast coverage of the China issue, because I'm sure that there's plenty of it, and I'll see whether maybe is there anything new from this morning or what? I'm not sure. All right, well, we'll scan that and keep an eye on Twitter as well. But we started with HuffPost. We might as well finish up here. Let's see. We left off saying that Trump had told this Nevada rally in November of 2016 that we've lost 70,000 factories since China joined the WTO. In recent months, Trump has been trying to craft a trade agreement with China at the same time as he is asking for Xi's help in cracking down on North Korea. So that's, at least that's like a normal line to have to walk and a balancing act to have to perform for a president. At a National Press Club speech Monday, Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, said that ZTE sanctions were an enforcement action unrelated to the trade negotiations, but that he would be reviewing the situation very, very promptly. Oh, I see. As a result of Trump's request. For ethics advocates, the timing of the ZTE tweet on the heels of the Indonesian development announcement is yet another example of the consequences of Trump's unwillingness to abide by the emoluments clause. The Chinese government seems to have figured out a way to manipulate President Trump, Weissman said. It's exactly why this anti-bribery clause of the Constitution is common sense. Yes, they seem to have figured out a way to manipulate him, by the way, which is tell him he's awesome and give him money. It's really not very difficult to figure out, but, well, they've done a great job of it, and it seems to be working pretty well for them. CNN, I noticed, had some more details on ZTE, what they do, what the trade talks are about, what specifically is at stake, etc. So that's some good background. I think we got the gist of the story here, but if you wanted a little bit of extra analysis of the trade negotiations, etc., that are behind all of this, you might as well take a quick look at that, and we will provide that one for you so you can thumb through it on your own. Yes, it caught a lot of attention on Twitter and around the world yesterday, including attention from Senator Ron Wyden, who's actually sort of kind of in a position to do a little something there in the Senate. But of course, the Senate under Republican control as well, so unlikely to actually take any action. But he tweeted, "Why is Donald Trump," and he used his Twitter handle on that one, "personally protecting a Chinese tech company guilty of evading U.S. sanctions on Iran? Maybe this." And he includes the tweet of Adam Davidson noting, well, exactly what we've been talking about. A Trump building project in Indonesia is receiving millions from Chinese government. How is this not emoluments? And the answer, of course, is it is not emoluments. That's how. So, we're stuck with it. What story are they pointing to here? This is in scmp.com, which I don't know. The South China Morning Post. Trump Indonesia project is latest stop on China's Belt and Road. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it's a Chinese publication, and maybe I just don't understand it. Project is part of the Lido City development in Jakarta, and is the first to link the U.S. president's business interests to Beijing's epic infrastructure plan. This is it's a publication of the AFP, the French press agency, but it's published in the South China Morning Post, about which I know nothing, so I'm not sure who's running the show over there. Is there anything else of interest that we should draw out of this article? I'm going to give it a quick scan. It doesn't look at first blush like it's going to give us any more pertinent facts than HuffPost did there, or I'm sure Daily Kos would have offered us had I had my head screwed on straight and gone there instead. Okay. Well, at any rate, I'm glad that at least it caught the eye of Ron Wyden, and he's likely to hold on tight to that one. But it likewise caught eyes, obviously, in the press. I say obviously. It's not always the case that it's totally obvious, but since we're reading press accounts of it, then yes. But more than that, it caught the attention of Glenn Kessler, the Washington Post's fact checker, who tweeted, "How interesting. Trump Indonesia project just got $500 million in Chinese government loans." And of course, he means it's interesting that it comes juxtaposed, as it does, with Trump's sudden interest in helping a Chinese employer. I don't really know. Brian Beutler likewise had an interesting take on things, only some of which I can read aloud. He is reacting to Aaron Rupar's tweet. Aaron Rupar, a journalist with Think Progress, asked about Chinese government's involvement in a Trump Organization project in Indonesia and if it violates the emoluments clause. Raj Shah said, "I'll have to refer you to the Trump Organization." We told you about that statement, of course, but Aaron tweets that one out for Brian's comment here. I'll have to refer you to the Trump Organization. You're asking about a private organization's dealings. That was the dodge that they used, which is really pretty ridiculous on its face. Brian Beutler, of course, making that obvious and commenting, when Trump's lawyer, Sherry Dillon, said no new foreign deals will be made whatsoever during the duration of President Trump's presidency, what she really meant was, F you. And we're not answering your questions. We're going to give you, in other words, the lie that it requires to escape from this press conference immediately, regardless of whether or not any future lie about our activities or any past lie uncovered in the future renders it inoperative. We don't care. We just want to get out of this press event alive. And since you have shown no inclination towards tearing us limb from limb when we lie to your faces, we think that's something we can accomplish here with the following dodge. I mean, they might as well just say, are you ready to write down this lie? Here it is. And then people will write it down, and then they'll say to themselves, did she just say she was lying to us? Yes, I did. And what are you going to do about it? And the answer is, I don't really have anything for you on that. We'll get back to you later. All right, let's see. Many other things are happening. It is true. But that's obviously the most egregious. But I did want to share something with you from yesterday. And you probably read about it because I gave you the teaser for. You'd probably read about it already. This was the New York Magazine profile on the strange relationship between, and that's the kindest way of putting it, between Donald Trump and Sean Hannity, which has been variously referred to as inappropriate, something, blah, blah, blah. Well, Pillow Talk was the favorite one I saw. Apparently, it's Donald Trump's habit to speak with him almost nightly. And by the way, the piece illustrated with a fantastic photo of a great illustration of smoked ham eyes on Donald Trump. I love that phrasing. After the smoky eye, the perfect smoky eye made everybody so mad. The perfect smoked ham eyes. I can't believe how sunken into his skull his stupid-looking chameleon eyes are and how puffy he is. It's very petty of me to say so every day, but he's a really disgusting-looking person, and it bothers me. But that's neither here nor there. Donald Trump and Sean Hannity like to talk before bedtime, and not just out loud. Olivia Nuzzi means to one another. Life inside the bunker of Fox News' resident Trumpelganger. You remember that great neologism yesterday. The call to the White House comes after 10 o'clock most weeknights when Hannity is over. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Sean Hannity broadcasts live at 9 p.m. on Fox News, usually from Studio J in Midtown, where the network is headquartered, but sometimes from a remote studio on Long Island, where he was raised and now lives. I can't complain too much. I have a home studio too, but I have to keep the windows open on mine. All White House phone numbers begin with the same 6 digits, by the way. They want you to know. Area code 202. And then 456 is the White House exchange. Hannity calls the White House switchboard, a number listed publicly, and reaches an operator. The operator refers to a list of cleared callers, a few dozen friends and family members outside the administration who may contact President Donald Trump through his official channel, among them his adult sons, Eric and Don Jr., private equity billionaire Steve Schwarzman, interestingly enough, who the president spent much of the campaign insinuating was too close to crooked Hillary, but now gets to call him direct whenever he wants. Also, Rupert Murdoch, as they say here, media billionaire Rupert Murdoch, real estate billionaire Tom Barrack, who headed up his inauguration fund, at 2 in the news, by the way, Patriots owner and also billionaire Robert Kraft, and Sean Hannity. The operator then dials the president, who leaves the Oval Office around 7 p.m. because I want to eat some snacks and watch telly. Leaves the Oval Office around 7 p.m. and who by this point in the evening, 10 o'clock, is almost always by himself, of course, on the 3rd floor of the executive residence. Parenthetically, they note the First Lady reportedly sleeps in a separate bedroom. He tells the operator to put Hannity through. Their chat begins casually with how are yous and what's going ons. On some days they speak multiple times, with one calling the other to inform him of the latest developments. Did you hear this one, Sean? I'm the most popular president in the whole wide world ever. Ooh, the birds are really out in force today. White House staff are aware that the calls happened thanks to the president entering the room and announcing, "I just hung up with Hannity." So I'm sure they roll their eyes at that one. Or referring to what Hannity said during their conversations. Hannity, Hannity, Hannity. Or even ringing Hannity up from his desk in their presence. Mr. President, you absolutely cannot do this. Hold on a minute. Sean, I want to do this thing. You should do it, Mr. President. See? He says I should do it. Trump and Hannity don't usually speak in the morning, which the president spends alone, watching TV and tweeting, like these birds in the background. During the first months of the administration in particular, the tweets launched at the beginning of the day landed like bitchy little grenades directed at the programming and personalities that angered him on MSNBC and CNN. Early on, usually we could count on the president watching Morning Joe first thing at 6 a.m., one White House official told me, not the Gorilla Channel, but Morning Joe. He'd watched an hour of that, then he'd move on to New Day for a segment or two, then he'd move on to Fox. Senior staffers worried about this pattern of behavior. By the time his day was formally underway, with an intelligence briefing in the Oval Office scheduled as late as 11 a.m., the whole world was often thrown off course, wondering whether there were tapes of his conversations with a fired FBI director, or if a TV host had been bleeding badly from a facelift at Mar-a-Lago. So all the intelligence changes in between the time he tweets and shows up for his briefing. With the hope of calming him down, then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and then Press Secretary Sean Spicer began a subtle campaign. It got to the point that they were just like, we need him to get off these channels and onto Fox and Friends, or else we're going to be chasing down this crazy train BS from MSNBC and CNN all day, one former White House official said. And so the genius plan was to switch over to chasing down crazy train BS from Fox and Friends all day. I guess they were upset that he would hate watch Morning Joe and CNN and then come to the office angry. If they have him watch Fox and Friends, he comes to the office angry, but angry about things that he thinks the telly agrees with him about. The little man in the telly box said he agrees with me. I'm the president. Terrific. Just what we need. Like all other ideas, this had the highest chance of implementation if Trump believed he'd thought of it on his own. Priebus and Spicer worked talking points about the network's high ratings and importance to his base of supporters into conversations until eventually it stuck, so that the president's television consumption today is what the current White House official called mainly a complete dosage of Fox. The former official added, Trump's someone who loves praise more than he likes hate watching Morning Joe. But the current official acknowledged that it has created a different set of problems. See? Sometimes on Fox, a lot of stories are embellished. That's a nice way of putting it. And they don't necessarily cover the big news stories of the day. When they cover the smaller stories, if that gets the president riled up, then that becomes an issue. Whenever he tweets, all of us do a mad dash or a mad scramble to find out as much information about that random topic as possible. We're used to it in a lot of ways, so it's part of our morning routine. And of course, Matt Gertz at Think Progress has documented this beautifully. There is no more direct relationship in the world than what goes on in Fox News in the morning and what Donald Trump tweets in the morning, or no more obvious evidence of a direct relationship. And I guess the beauty of the Sean Hannity one is that he doesn't broadcast at that time, so we can't tell in the same way that we can what time does Fox and Friends say something and what time does Donald Trump tweet about it. By the way, that reminded me about things that get the president riled up. I saw a great tweet this morning that I think put it quite succinctly. Who tweeted this one? Andrew Lawrence, senior researcher at Media Matters. And he tweets, 75% of the conservative media grift is finding stories that barely impact the people involved and pretending it impacts all of society. That's how culture war is fought on Fox News. The screen grab he has here is from, I don't know what, the story with Martha McCallum, a show I've never heard of. But the screen grab is, I guess that's probably not Martha McCallum. It's some other guy. And the chyron on the screen, though, this is the sort of story they love to grab. New Jersey high school allows anyone who tries out to make the cheerleading squad. What? Are you kidding me? Anyone can make the cheerleading squad? It's like unbelievable. That is, this is not how this works. That is correct. I cannot believe it. Yeah, I know.
No.
It's true. Say you wanted to try out for the cheerleading squad and you thought, I should get a participation trophy. I mean, this is essentially what this is. They're angry that everyone who participates can get what they want out of something. And of course, as somebody else pointed out, in response to this, it is very likely that we're really talking about a situation where they needed 25 people to fill out the roster for the cheerleading squad, and only 10 people showed up. So it's not necessarily that it is the policy to allow anyone who tries out to make the team, although even if that was the case, who could possibly care about that? Why is that on the news? North Korea, Iran, Israel, the president taking emoluments from China to give away money and national security to a Chinese phone manufacturer. Anything at all. Stormy Daniels, if you have to. But they're focused on the cheerleading thing. But that's what I thought made it such a great tweet. 75% of the conservative media grift is latching on to stories like this and turning them into national ones for no good reason. Even if they really do just let everybody onto the squad, and there's 150 people in the cheerleading squad now, what difference could that possibly make? But this is the sort of thing that riles culture warriors. When I was a kid, they had standards about cheerleaders. Yeah? Then what happened? It doesn't make any goddamn sense. But anyway, thanks to the folks who were commenting on this with me today. In this case, Tal, who tweets as Giant CU92. CU92, that sounds dangerous. Okay. Well, at any rate, I thought that was a good comment. This probably is one of those things where they had room for as many as 25 people. 20 showed up, and they fanned the flames into a major story. And you'll see something stupid happening, like Donald Trump tweeting about this. This is outrage. This is this New Jersey high school. Can you believe what they're doing? When I was a kid, you could count on, I liked the cheerleaders in my school, and they were so hot. And I counted on the discerning eye of our cheerleading captain to choose the best looking girls for the cheerleading team so that I didn't have to do the selections myself. Now they'll just let anybody do it, and it could be some slob. This is like what's going through his mind. This is outrageous, and we've got to do so. I have ordered the Commerce Secretary to look into this while I look into their skirts. That's... This is going to be occupying his time now. Thankfully, this wasn't on Fox and Friends, but if it was, you could be sure that the President of the United States would suddenly be full bore involved in what's happening in the cheerleading squad in some New Jersey high school. I find that not difficult to believe at all. But anyway, back to Olivia Nuzzi, who has a more coherent story to tell. More than most politicians, she continues, Trump abides by the Groucho Marx law of fraternization. He inherently distrusts anyone who chooses to work for him. Interesting. Seeking outside affirmation as often as possible from as vast and varied a group as he can muster. But Hannity is at the center. Generally, the feeling is that Sean is the leader of the outside kitchen cabinet, one White House official said, echoing other staffers, current and removed. I like the terminology of removed. I was told by one person that Hannity fills the political void left by Steve Bannon, a statement Bannon seemed to agree with, which is hilarious because, of course, Bannon considers himself a mighty, mighty, world-class intellectual, whereas Sean Hannity, I guess he probably also considers himself that. And they both might consider themselves that, and they are both dopes. But Bannon, I think, seems to have a little bit more going on upstairs, believe it or not, than Sean Hannity does. And I don't know that Hannity really claims credentials as an intellectual. But anyway, so I guess Bannon seemingly agrees with this. Sean Hannity understands the basic issues of economic nationalism and America First foreign policy at a deeper level than the august staff of Jonathan Chait and the effing clowns at New York Magazine, he said. And you can always count on Bannon to say that, and that, whether true or not, you can make the case for me, Steve Bannon, that Sean Hannity is a powerful intellectual. Well, he's smarter than some dumb liberals that I hate. You really are truly an intellectual force to be reckoned with. The White House official assessed the influence of White House officials and other administration personnel, that's an odd sentence, as exactly equal to that of Fox News. That doesn't seem like a good idea. Unlike on Fox and Friends, where Trump learns new, frequently incorrect information, Hannity acts to transform Trump's pervasive ambivalence into resolve by convincing him what he's already decided he believes and what he's decided to do is correct. After the new year, Hannity went on air with what he said was breaking news. Here's the news. Ready? A list of Trump's accomplishments. That's breaking news. Which scrolled by on the screen like song titles from an infomercial for hits from the 70s. His accomplishments included things like, quote, drafting a plan to defeat ISIS. Ooh, good job. Signing individual executive orders, and the separate accomplishment of having, quote, signed 55 executive orders. A little double dip there. I like that one. The former White House official called the trouble caused by Hannity and Fox more broadly a effed up feedback loop that puts Trump in a weird headspace. Well, any space that he's in is going to be a weird headspace. He's got a weird head. What ends up happening is Judge Jeanine or Hannity fill him up with a bunch of crazy crap, not their word, and everyone on staff has to go back and knock down all the effing fires they started. Sounds about right. But for the most part, policy has taken a back seat on Hannity, regardless of the news of the day. The overarching narrative of the show is the political persecution of Trump, and by extension of Hannity and Hannity's viewers at the hands of the so-called deep state and the Democratic Party and the corrupt mainstream media, a wholly owned subsidiary of both. Everything comes back to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russia's involvement in the election, a phony, petty diversion from what should be the real focus, prosecuting Hillary Clinton. Hannity admits to advising Trump, but on the air he's repeatedly mocked suggestions that he functions as an unofficial chief of staff and criticized the fake news media for not bothering to reach out to him for the truth. A spokesperson for Fox News, of course, declined multiple interview requests for this article on Hannity's behalf. More than any other figure of the right-wing infosphere, Hannity has behaved as if he were an extension of the Trump communications department, his daily stream of assertions serving to prop up Trump and, in real time, define what Trumpism is supposed to be. On the phone, he and the president alternate between the witch hunt and gabbing like old girlfriends about media gossip and whose show sucks and who's getting killed in the ratings and who's winning. The answer, of course, Hannity, and therefore Trump. Oh, and sports and Kanye West, all of it sprinkled with a staccato, and you can't read this on the air, effing, effed, effer. All those great words. He's not a systematic thinker at all. He's not an ideologue, one person who knows both men said of Hannity. He gives tactical advice versus strategic advice. Doesn't matter to me which kind he gives, but okay. The talks may be more important for Trump than for Hannity in a therapeutic sense, even if it's nearly impossible to accept what we're seeing from the president reflects any kind of therapy. He doesn't live with his wife, one person who knows both men said of Trump, explaining that he lacks someone to decompress with at the end of the day. When they spoke a few hours before Trump welcomed home the newly freed Americans who'd been held hostage in North Korea, he and Hannity told each other how proud they were, how happy the news made them. You can't function without that, this person said, adding that Hannity actually likes him, even though, this is great, he knows how nuts he is. He's decided that you're all in or you're not. That's what he's doing. At 2:46 p.m. on April 16th, Hannity was on Long Island preparing for a 3-hour stretch of radio. Let not your heart be troubled, he says at the start of each program, a line from John, chapter 14, verses 1 through 6, his favorite Bible verses, apparently. 30 miles away from his circulatory organs, half the reporters in America had joined Stormy Daniels to look on as lawyers representing Trump's longtime lawyer Michael Cohen argued before District Judge Kimba Wood that thousands of pages of records seized from Cohen's home, office, hotel room, and safe during an FBI raid a week earlier were protected under attorney-client privilege. You know where this story is going. It's about Sean Hannity, right? As were the identities of his clients, which he admitted amounted to a grand total of 3, a shockingly low number of clients for a lawyer to have unless they're right out of law school, Michael Avenatti said. Cohen's lawyers released the identities of only 2 of them, Trump and former Republican National Committee Deputy Finance Chair and extraordinary person in his own right, Elliot Broidy, for whom Cohen reportedly negotiated a non-disclosure agreement involving a love child with a Playboy model. And yes, of course, they do note that there is now speculation that that child was in fact Donald Trump's instead. At the time, Cohen was still presenting himself as a fairly conventional lawyer and these as fairly conventional clients. But on May 8th, after Avenatti somehow obtained Cohen's financial records, we learned that he'd been paid more than $1 million in total by several large corporations, including among them Novartis, AT&T, and Columbus Nova, an investment firm whose biggest client is the Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg, all for unclear reasons. Plus more after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a brief break at the top of the hour. We continue with Olivia Nuzzi's look at the oddball relationship between Sean Hannity and Donald Trump. We'll continue with this for a little while. I could consume the rest of the day very easily, and maybe we'll just let it because it's fun discussion fodder. Plus, it's just unbelievable that it even happens. At 2:52 p.m., of course, we're talking about what happened in the hearing in Kimba Wood's courtroom on the day that we found out the weird news about Michael Cohen. At 2:52 p.m., the world learned that Cohen's secret third client was Sean Hannity, meaning that he was, at least for a moment, one of 4 players, including Trump, at the very center of multiple investigations he had been railing against on air for the better part of a year. It was like a bomb went off in the courtroom, Avenatti recalled. Several reporters described how, at the mention of his name, there were gasps. CNN, MSNBC, and momentarily even Hannity's own network, Fox News, covered the development as if it were a missing plane. Fox News anchor Shep Smith referred to Hannity as the elephant in the room. It wasn't as though nobody had suspected the president's relationship with Hannity went beyond the symbiotic chumminess traditional to the social climbing media figures and egomaniacal politicos of the Northeast Corridor. You don't become a media elite by abiding, she adds. Anyone who watched Hannity's show or listened to his radio broadcast, together they add up to 4 hours of talking each day, for which he's paid a reported $36 million a year. That hurts. Anyway, certainly anyone who watched or listened would have suspected exactly that. In other words, that they had this strange relationship going on. But its obviousness was almost too much to take in without something snapping. It was ridiculous in the way that Law and Order can seem ridiculous if you don't suspend your critical faculties. The same few detectives are present and central at every pivotal moment of each case, as though there were no other cops in all of New York. At 3 o'clock, Hannity came onto the radio as scheduled. It was very strange, he said on air, describing the moment he read his own name on his own network as a breaking news chyron. He joked about how all these media people had to listen to his show that day. I actually think it's pretty funny, he said. He explained that Cohen wasn't his lawyer, but had offered legal advice as a friend, and Hannity had assumed their conversations. Companies connected to Hannity own more than 870 homes in 7 states, The Guardian quickly reported. He'd assumed that their conversations, which he said were related to real estate, were privileged. Dubious claim, but there were dubious claims all around. His new phone vibrated, the hum of every friend and colleague and reporter alive going straight to the source to figure out what the hell was happening. I am on air, he said later on the show. I wish everyone would stop calling me. At other networks, on-air personalities failing to disclose their personal relationship with the leading figure in a news story, a major news story, a figure whom they repeatedly defended, would surely suffer some kind of consequences. At Fox, things were different. It didn't even register. The real sin is false advertising, said the person who knows both Hannity and Trump, adding that both have gotten away with a whole lot by being seemingly upfront about it. Fox issued a statement of full support the next day. People can't deal with hypocrisy and lying, but they can deal with everything else. When the Stormy Daniels story broke, it was like, are you surprised? Really? Are you kidding? He told us that. We know who he is. Was the Cohen thing like, I can't believe it? It was like, yeah, of course. Hannity says that kind of thing on air. He's totally transparent. You didn't know about that, but was it plausible? Did he have dinner over there? If he wife swapped with Melania, would you be shocked? No, of course not. If Chris Hayes was doing that, you'd be like, wait a second, what? This, you're like, they probably have a vacation house in Punta Gorda. Earlier this year, Smith dismissed the opinion side of Fox News as strictly entertainment. They don't really have rules on the opinion side. They can say whatever they want, he said. But the fact that the network took no action over its host's very intimate, very strange relationship with the president and his chief fixer also reflects just how much autonomy Hannity has managed to carve out for himself since his friend took the White House. Hannity is the designated primetime survivor from the Roger Ailes era. But at the outset of Fox News' post-Ailes age, there were reported speculations that James Murdoch, Rupert's son and chief executive of 21st Century Fox, who's known to hold some liberal views, had intentions of pushing the network closer to the center, or at least bringing it back from the edge of the cliff. The Murdoch sons have said publicly they have no plans to alter the editorial direction of Fox News. Over the summer, rumors began to circulate that Hannity and Bill O'Reilly, who was fired from Fox in April of 2017, were talking to Sinclair Broadcast Group, the largest owner of local TV stations in the country, about the company's plan to purchase a cable channel and position itself as a far-right competitor to Fox. Wow. To those who knew Hannity, the rumors didn't look like an accident. It's really simple. If you're in prison and someone cuts in front of you, I love their speculation, like they know about this. If you're in prison and someone cuts in front of you in the chow line, you bite his nose off, says the source. You do that not because you care about your place in the chow line, but because if you don't, you know how the story goes. Okay, it's standard fare, right? I heard in a movie once, if you don't beat up the toughest guy, you just get victimized in prison. So that's a great plan. And I suspect that reality is somewhat more nuanced even in prison. Anyway, today, a year into a very harmonious relationship with the president, and despite being something like the face of Fox News, Hannity doesn't entertain calls from network leadership, according to a source, though they rarely try to call him anyway. He's only met James Murdoch once at a baseball game. His relationship with Fox News management is non-existent, according to the source. A Fox News representative says Hannity has an excellent relationship with management. If he wants to defend the president's lawyer every night without telling anyone that the president's lawyer is also his lawyer, he can do it. And if he wants to broadcast from inside his own house, a few feet away from a golden retriever and a white Russian, he can do that too. And I don't object to that. That sounds like a great idea, except for both of the other things. I'm sure golden retrievers are nice. White Russians, I suppose, I mean, I know some people who enjoy them a lot in particular. I don't understand the idea of mixing those two ingredients, but look, I don't even like mixing citrus with milk. I won't eat creamsicles. So you're not going to get me to pour vodka in there. The political divides of the Obama years were good for Hannity, but the Trump administration has been even better because he gets to run it, of course. In April, on average, he aired in more than 3 million homes across the country each night, according to Nielsen, a wider audience than Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, although you'd never know it, watching or listening to him. Central to Hannity's storytelling about himself, which is a big part of what he does every night, that's what I do in the morning, right, is maintaining the sense that he's the underdog. It's not hard for me to maintain that sense. It's not acting if I do it. Sean Hannity, or maybe it's method acting, that's what it is. Sean Hannity has never been about the news. He's a specific form of entertainment, a high-energy delivery device for a simplistic, far-right worldview that is less about ideology and policy outcomes and more about winning. Hannity is a space in which all conversations are debates, and all debates are winnable by the protagonist, Sean Hannity. When he does make news, it's usually by accident, as when, earlier this month, Rudy Giuliani appeared on the program to throw several months of constant lying off course by announcing that Trump had reimbursed Cohen for the $130,000 he paid Stormy Daniels. Oh, I didn't know, Hannity said. He did? Why would he know that? Right. Well, they've been lying about it for a long time. Hannity was always someone where if you were a Republican and you went on his show, it would be the easiest interview possible. A person who worked on the campaign of one of Trump's Republican primary rivals told me. It was legitimately impossible to get jammed up by Sean Hannity. It wasn't even something you'd consider. It was the softball of softball interviews. But almost as soon as Trump announced his candidacy in June of 2015, Hannity's reputation changed. I think it was just the star angle. I guess that's a possibility. It was just the star angle. He was just wowed by Trump's star factor more so than anything else. Sean Hannity's the world's biggest star effer. It was just kind of crazy how he went from being someone who put everyone... I'm sorry, how do I say this? It was kind of crazy how he went from being someone who everyone tried to have at their launch events to have a full-hour puff piece to someone who people were like, oh, we can't really go on. We're not going to get a fair shake because he's so pro-Trump. That fandom may also explain Hannity's otherwise inexplicable, quote, legal relationship with Cohen, an unlikely counsel for someone of Hannity's wealth and status. Trump doesn't actually have wealth. Why would anyone be nice to Cohen? A person close to the president asked. Because he's Trump's lawyer. So Hannity sees that and he assumes if Trump thinks he's smart, then he's smart. The person who knows Hannity and Trump agreed. I think the obvious answer is the answer. He's a total suck-up. It's almost like getting a lock of Elvis's hair or something. It's a great way to hire a lawyer. Even before the campaign and the FBI raid connected them through martyrdom, Trump and Hannity were men of similar habits and preoccupations, both outward-facing, projecting to the world all day long, and yet prone to stretches of retreat, to a little bit of weirdness that accompanies any comparable level of fame. Both golf, both diet by cutting out carbs. Hannity adheres to a version of the ketogenic diet, cooking often for himself. You know the president won't be doing that. While the president removes the buns from the 2 Big Macs and 2 Filet-O-Fish sandwiches he gets from McDonald's, according to a book written by his former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. That's some kind of diet you got there, boy. Although Hannity shills a custom pillow on his radio show that he says cured his insomnia, it didn't. Both he and the president are night owls who sleep for only a few hours, and however differently their days begin, they arrive to the same comfortable sense of freedom after dark as highly visible people who are temporarily unseen. One reason they click is because of being celebrities. John Gomez, Hannity's friend since elementary school, told me, in broadcasting, you live and die by the ratings. I think they have that in common, And they're competitors, they're competitive. They were born 15 years apart. Trump at Jamaica Hospital to rich parents, and Hannity at Metropolitan Medical in Upper Manhattan to a county jail official and a family court officer. And they were raised 12 miles from one another in Jamaica, Queens, and Franklin Square, Long Island, respectively. Hannity leans on his personal narrative, 70% like a person running for office, and 30% like someone just dumbfounded by his luck, or his blessings, as he characterizes it. He was an uninspired student who found outlets for his restlessness and need to connect with others through odd jobs during his childhood and early adulthood. Paperboy, busboy, line cook, bartender, house painter, dishwasher, finishing one shift only to walk into the next, like so many other men and women for whom better fortune never comes. Trump, meanwhile, was getting into the casino business in Atlantic City, where he would stiff guys like young Hannity left and right. Only in America could they end up in the same green room, convinced they look at the world the same way. At the Cheesecake Factory in Islip, Gomez told me he didn't think Trump would have fit in with him and Hannity growing up, that they were different types of guys. I do not see those two guys growing up together. I don't see it, Gomez said. He just wouldn't be attracted to us. He added with a laugh, you could fit Hannity's plane inside his plane. He's a hell of a lot more flamboyant than Hannity is. Hannity had been using the same beat-up old grill with which he lit with newspapers for decades, he said, taking it with him from the modest house to bigger house to mansion to compound. He always drove the same model car, an Escalade. It would be nice if Hannity, forked over a few bucks for an Aston Martin or something, Gomez said, that I would borrow. He really didn't have a pot to piss in, pardon the expression, and he did everything on his own. Linda McLaughlin told me. McLaughlin's been the executive producer of Hannity's radio show for the past 8 years and his sidekick for 12. People refer to me as his Robin, she said. Robin Quivers, I guess, of the Howard Stern show. Of Hannity's listeners, she theorized, I think they get him. He was their dream, As a dropout 29 years ago, Hannity was hired as a shock jock on a college radio station, KCSB, in Santa Barbara, hosting a show called The Pursuit of Happiness. Listeners protested when Hannity, on air, said gays were disgusting people who were brainwashing the public. When he was fired, he enlisted the ACLU to defend his right to free speech. The case, which he won, brought him publicity, and he moved to Alabama to accept a job with WVNN, and then to Georgia to work for WGST. Oh well, not the finest moment necessarily for the ACLU. In 1996, Roger Ailes hired him. Hannity, married for 25 years, has a 19-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. When he was asked by Playboy how he would feel if one of his children were gay, he said he would love them unconditionally and would only be upset if they were Democrats. I guess that's actually the right answer, but that's not how he got his job. That's the deal. Hannity first met the future president during his early years at Fox. In 2011, he provided Trump with a platform to discuss birtherism, the racist conspiracy theory that Obama wasn't born in America and therefore was not a legitimate president. The issue could go away in a minute, Hannity said to Trump. Just show the certificate. During the campaign, as Trump attempted to argue that he'd been against the Iraq War from the beginning, even though he was on the record as initially having supported it, Hannity came to his aid, claiming that after his shows back then, Trump would call him to argue. But Gomez told me he didn't think Hannity and Trump were truly friends before 2016, when there was something in it for Hannity. When Hannity helped Trump get elected, and Trump helped Hannity become the most popular person on cable news. An entanglement that has now made Hannity a secondary character in the drama of a major federal investigation. Every morning, Hannity meets Glenn Rubin, a man he calls his sensei, who coaches him through 2 hours of street martial arts. He does this for fitness, and despite carrying a firearm, which he reportedly once took out and pointed at Juan Williams on set, seems like a safe gun practice, he does this for fitness and despite carrying a firearm for self-defense. Too many parenthetical comments. getting in the way here. But I'm not your editor, Olivia. On his show, he once aired footage of his training session with former UFC heavyweight champion Chuck Liddell. Is it Liddell? How does he say that? I don't know. This is my fist, he said, pointing it at the camera. You can pan in on that. The shot got tighter around his balled-up hand. On Twitter, he proved an easy mark for trolls who detected a weak spot. Do you even lift, bro? One asked. Street martial arts for 5 years. A lot of core work, he said flatly in response. Another time, he listed the number of push-ups, 100, and sit-ups, 100. He does each day. Grr, what a man. He's discussed his hobby with such frequency that in 2016 he inspired the Washington Free Beacon to create a 2x23 supercut titled Sean Hannity Karate Update. Is that a 2 minute and 23 second? I was like, what is that? Is that the, all right, never mind. So they produced the Sean Hannity Karate Update. Applying the term karate to his workouts greatly agitates him. Why does everyone say karate? Not even close to what I do, he tweeted once. A year later, he tweeted again, oh, and by the way, I never did karate in my life. Another lie! When he's not doing karate, he's golfing. But the rest of the time, he's often alone, fussing over his dogs. That's nice. A Bernese mountain dog, Gracie, and an English cream golden retriever, Marley. That's what the coal miners wanted, yeah. He's trying to breed Marley, whom he got from Majestic Manors, a high-end breeder in Indiana. And if he doesn't renew his contract when it's up, his dream is moving to a farm full of dogs. He maintains constant contact with 1 million people all at once, texting his friends as compulsively as he vapes. All through his radio show and even on TV during commercial breaks and whenever the camera isn't on him. At home, he watches movies like Goodfellas, Braveheart, Schindler's List, and TV, Homeland, and Billions. He drinks White Russians or Coors Light or vodka with Sprite Zero. Or if he's at Del Frisco's, a frozen concoction of vodka and pineapple juice that they describe as a martini. It is not. He cooks for himself and is especially proud of a dish he calls turkey chop, a Hannity special. Woo-wee. But he's not entirely bunkered in out on Long Island. He has bursts of manic sociability, too. Gomez told me of a typical invite to lunch at Peter Luger, the Great Neck spin-off, of course, not the Brooklyn original, with all signs suggesting it'd be just the two of them and their steaks. Somehow, in the few hours between the end of their call and the beginning of the lunch, Hannity would accumulate 23 additional guests, having invited seemingly every living being to cross his path, such as his inability to turn off the thing that drives him to connect with others. You hungry? You like steak? Gomez said, impersonating his friend's distinct, cheerful bark. Meet me at Luger's. Privately, Hannity has expressed openness to a different kind of retirement, far removed from a dog farm, running for office, something he hadn't considered in the past. Gomez, whose own unsuccessful congressional race Hannity advised on, good job, said he thought the only way he'd do it is if he didn't think there was anybody else for the job. Something, incidentally, Trump used to say before the beginning of his political career. McLaughlin burst out laughing when I asked about Hannity 2024. She doesn't believe he has any interest. But on the show, the two of them joke often, lately, about how Hannity might as well run, since he's being vetted more than Obama. Ha ha ha! Well, that was like Mallard Fillmore worthy. All right, well, anyway, so he bursts out laughing, he has no interest, etc. He might as well run because he's already running this administration, I'd say. The job creates such intense isolation that you'd go crazy if you didn't have... Well, people do go crazy. They all go crazy, said the person who knows both Trump and Hannity. You have two choices. You can either go insane or you can create your own separate world. And that's what he's done. He hired his brother-in-law as his producer, and people look on and they're like, oh, that's nepotism. No, that's his effort to build a world that he's safe in. What a snowflake. Because it's so crazy that you have to do that. The only thing you could compare it to, this person said, would be the presidency. Coincidentally enough. And that's the end. We made it all the way through the Olivia Nuzzi piece, and I wasn't sure whether we could or should do that, but we did, just to get a little more of a sense, perhaps, of, I guess it's time to check in on, who's running this presidency, who's the real chief of staff here, And what are they all about? I mean, it's actually worth reading all the way through in that sense if you want to know maybe like what could be driving what the government is up to. Mark Sumner did cover the story for the front page over at the Daily Kos, and which we refer to as just Daily Kos, but without the. But yeah, it was an interesting addition to learning a while back that he also depends on Lou Dobbs for a lot of his daily consultation as well. So be sure to take a look at Mark Sumner's take on the situation for additional commentary on this wacky relationship here. Let's see. I wanted to check in once again on the story we read a little bit about yesterday. This time over at Slate, Jeremy Stahl has a story about the Michael Cohen meetings with Michael Flynn and the Qatari diplomat. And it's written under this interesting take of a headline that Michael Cohen's meetings with Flynn and the Qatari diplomat, quote, might be the key to unlocking the Steele dossier. Michael Avenatti himself was actually tweeting this article around, and I thought it might be interesting under that headline to check in on that. How so? How does it unlock the Steele dossier? The founder of a 3-on-3 basketball league, we heard a lot about it yesterday, who claims he was offered a bribe by a one-time Qatari diplomat to arrange access to Steve Bannon, said on Monday that the former diplomat is the same person photographed with Michael Cohen at Trump Tower in December of 2016. So that answers that question. Again, Big 3 Basketball League co-founder Jeff Kwatinetz, how did we decide to say that? I don't know. Kwatinetz told Slate that he recognized Ahmed al-Rumayhi in photos with Cohen that were tweeted Sunday by Michael Avenatti. Yes, 100%, he said when asked if he thought the videos and photos were of al-Rumayhi. Last week, Kwatinetz, who is the co-founder of the Big 3 with Ice Cube, accused al-Rumayhi in a sworn court declaration of making an attempted bribe and of suggestively boasting that Flynn had not refused, quote, our money. Sports Trinity, al-Rumayhi's sports firm, would not confirm or deny that al-Rumayhi was at the meeting on December 12, 2016, which occurred less than 2 hours before a public meeting between Cohen and incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. We do not confirm and have no basis to confirm the video, Sports Trinity said in a statement sent to Slate by Robert Siegfried, vice chair of Kext & Company, a communications firm. Siegfried declined to answer questions about whether or not al-Rumayhi remains in the country at this time. Al-Rumayhi's lawyer, Brian Hirschman of Jones Day, did not respond to multiple email and phone inquiries about whether the images were of al-Rumayhi and about his current whereabouts. The photos were posted on Twitter on Sunday by Avenatti, who's representing Stormy Daniels, of course. Avenatti tweeted the images that appeared to show al-Rumayhi entering an elevator in Trump Tower 5 days after the news broke of the multi-billion-dollar sale of 19.5% of the Russian fossil fuel giant Rosneft to Swiss trading firm Glencore and Qatar's Sovereign Investment Fund. That's how that got into the story. Glencore and Qatar sold off a major stake of Rosneft to China last year, but earlier this month, Qatar bought back into the Russian company for a total stake of 19%. The Rosneft deal features prominently in an investigative dossier, now we're getting the picture here, compiled by Chris Steele, of course. A central claim of the Steele dossier was that Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page, during an alleged meeting with Rosneft officials in the summer of 2016, promised that a Trump administration would undo sanctions against Russia, in part in exchange for brokerage of the Rosneft deal. In May of 2016, al-Rumayhi reportedly took over as head of a major division of the wealth fund ultimately involved in the Rosneft deal. The allegations in the Steele dossier, made in October of 2016, suggested a future quid pro quo deal between Russia and the Trump campaign. Trump has been conspicuously resistant to Russian sanctions despite widespread congressional support from both parties. As Jed Sugarman has noted in Slate, during congressional testimony, Page acknowledged meeting with Andrei Baranov, the head of investor relations at Rosneft, during his July 2016 trip to Russia, and acknowledged briefly discussing the sale of Rosneft as well as there being some general reference to sanctions. We'll continue in 2 minutes after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show, right here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on with reading the Slate piece, allegedly connecting the news of the Qatari diplomat entering Trump Tower for meetings in 2016 with the Steele dossier. And I guess the major connection there, if it is one, is that it is the very same sovereign wealth fund with which Ahmed al-Rumayhi has been charged as and I guess one of the investment chiefs was involved in the Rosneft deal referenced in the Steele dossier. Let's see, where we left off was that Carter Page had acknowledged in congressional testimony to having met with Andrei Baranov, the head of investor relations at Rosneft, in July of 2016 as he made a trip to Russia, acknowledged briefly discussing both the sale of Rosneft as well as there being some reference to sanctions. As Business Insider's Natasha Bertrand has reported, Page also acknowledged meeting with top Rosneft managers in Moscow on December 8th, 4 days before the apparent Cohen-al-Rumayhi meeting and 1 day after the completion of the Rosneft deal. Avenatti noted in his tweets over the weekend that Cohen was seen meeting with Flynn and incoming Energy Secretary Rick Perry within 2 hours of apparently entering the elevator with al-Rumayhi. Here is a brief rundown of the images in question. These are a pair of photos of al-Rumayhi attending Big Three basketball games in July of 2017. So I guess you are meant to be able to do your own visual comparison. And I will tell you for the record that the comparison is a fairly favorable one. You can't see it on the radio, but you can take a look through the links that we'll provide later on in the afternoon in Scott Anderson's post. Here below is footage compiled from C-SPAN's Trump Tower live feed of Cohen entering the elevator with the figure who appears to be al-Rumayhi. One wonders who else is in the elevator there. But I knew it was a good idea to have that camera on there. It seemed weird at the time, but it seemed like a good idea to document who would be coming and going. There's also footage of a figure who appears to be al-Rumayhi leaving Trump Tower less than 90 minutes after entering with Cohen. And footage from multiple feeds, not just C-SPAN, of Flynn coming down 12 minutes after al-Rumayhi's apparent exit, loitering in the lobby for a bit, should have been arrested, and waiting to meet with Cohen and Perry a few minutes later. It's interesting that they have him loiter in the lobby, like there's no place upstairs that he can hang out. Last week, Quatinetz, in a sworn declaration filed as part of pending litigation against al-Rumayhi and a number of Big Three investors, said that the former Qatari diplomat offered him a bribe, you know that story, and that he rejected it. Al-Rumayhi's name was also attached to a 90-day, $2.5 million lobbying contract with the Ashcroft law firm in the summer of 2017. 3 weeks before he and his investing partners approached Quatinetz and Big Three. What does that have to do with anything? Not sure. A spokesman for Al Rumahi's sports group has called Quatinetz's claims xenophobic and meritless. The photos of Al Rumahi and Trump Tower come on the heels of news last week, initially revealed by Avenatti and later confirmed by the New York Times and NBC News, that Cohen, in the initial months of the Trump presidency, had accepted a $500,000 payment from a subsidiary investment arm of a firm owned by Viktor Vekselberg, a Russian oligarch and purported Putin ally who was later sanctioned. The firm, run by Vekselberg's cousin, has denied Vekselberg's involvement in that payment. That payment was made to the same shell company established by Cohen to pay Stormy Daniels $130,000 in exchange for the hush agreement. The latest revelations could prompt more questions for Flynn, who last year pleaded guilty to lying to investigators and is cooperating, I guess, with the special counsel's probe. It also opens the door to possibly corroborate Flynn's meeting accounts with other potential witnesses, namely Cohen, Perry, and potentially Ahmed al-Rumahi. So that's a little bit of additional information that we're able to glean from Slate on that one. A couple of other stories that we should probably touch on. Oh, there's a million stories we probably should touch on. And we'll see which ones of these do we think we can actually get to. One I've been holding for a little while, which I thought was of some interest, but is about Michael Cohen. And it's probably less interesting than the other story, but because it's about Michael Cohen, makes for a nice segue. But do I think I can get through it? Maybe, because I don't think the other story is that huge. Let's take a look at this one. New York Times from May 9th, that's last week. I thought this was an interesting headline. How Michael Cohen, denied job in White House, was seen as its gatekeeper. A little bit of background information, I think, makes it perhaps a little easier to understand how he shook everybody down for cash, despite the fact that he had no policy ideas, connections, or understanding whatsoever. The photo of Michael Cohen that illustrates the piece is captioned, "Through a secretive shell company, Michael D. Cohen, President Trump's personal lawyer, was paid by major corporations for help navigating Washington in the Trump era." Here's the story. Mike McIntyre, Ken Vogel, Katie Thomas, and Cecilia Kang get the byline. After paying off a pornographic film actress and doing other tasks, whatever that might be, to help his boss win the presidency, Michael Cohen was surprised to find that the doors of the White House were mostly closed to him. Mr. Cohen did not land a hoped-for job in President Trump's administration. He imagined himself as chief of staff. We've mentioned that in the past. And in January last year, he left the Trump Organization, where he had long served as the in-house fixer without a clear portfolio. But he managed to turn what looked like an exile into a lucrative opportunity. Armed with the self-appointed title of personal attorney to the president, Mr. Cohen, who had served as a personal injury lawyer and owned a taxi business, became seen as the man who could help others gain access to the seat of power that had been denied to him. That is an interesting thing to think about. I mean, think about how that came about. And my guess is here that for whatever reason, and it might be a smart reason, Donald Trump thought, too dangerous to actually have him in the White House. Or it could be that he was convinced of that by other people, perhaps Steve Bannon, perhaps Stephen Miller, who thought that they would be the gatekeepers and didn't want Michael Cohen around as a rival. It could have been as simple as that. Or they actually knew, yeah, this guy's as dirty as hell, and the further we keep him from the White House, the better. But I'm wondering whether, I'm speculating, that I could see Donald Trump talking to him about not giving him the job and saying, listen, you don't want to work in the White House. I can only pay you X amount. You're a public employee at that point, and I can't compensate you at nearly the amount of money that you could be making on the outside. I say this only because I also speculate that Donald Trump may have at some point, and you'll never prove it, but may have at some point actually advised Cohen to do this and say, you really should, your plan should be to shake down companies. You can convince everybody. Everybody knows who you are. You could convince any company in America to give you $1 million to get insight into me. And you should go do it right now. I think he probably advised him of that. Not that Cohen couldn't have thought of that shakedown himself. It would be his obvious first thought. But I do think that there was a good chance that he may have gotten either the idea or even the go-ahead to do that from Trump. I mean, if you could prove it, fantastic. It's just one more charge to add to the pile. But I doubt it. Anyway, I don't doubt that it happened. I doubt that you could prove it. All right. So the other interesting thing I thought here, if Bannon and Miller and others were trying to push him aside and eliminate him as a rival, think about. I mean, we've already got lots of questions, and certainly, you know, like at Novartis and AT&T, they've said, yeah, it was a huge mistake to pay him anything, much less to believe that we were going to get anything of value out of paying him, or you know, anything like legal that was of value. The idea of access, sure. Favor, yeah, we absolutely thought we could get some of that, but even that's in question. I mean, look at what's happened here. Here are the dynamics. Okay, so Cohen doesn't land a hoped-for job in Trump's administration. He imagined himself as chief of staff, like at the heart of the administration. How far off was he? He got nothing. He hoped for the top-ranking spot and got zero. So when you go to companies and say, I can offer you access to the inside, I'm so close. Donald and I are like this, you know, I make the little crossed fingers thingy here. Yeah, if you're like this, how come you didn't get jack squat in the way of a White House position? Oh, well, the answer is both he and I decided it would be mutually beneficial if I was out here squeezing you for $1 million. Speaking of which, I mean, is that how the conversation goes? Like, why the CEOs of these companies don't then say, I mean, and I guess it's because they realize it's a shakedown and they don't want to be, you know, caught on the outside and make Trump angry by not paying off Cohen, who leads them to believe that it's Trump's expectation that they will pay him off and that he'll be angry if they don't. But you do have to have some moment to pause. Is there no, you know, if it was a movie, there'd be a conversation. Let me ask you something. You want me to pay $1 million to make Trump happy and to get access? If he likes you that much, how come you didn't get any kind of a job? Oh, because we knew we could squeeze much more money out of you on the outside. Speaking of which, my fee just went up because now you're pissing me off. Ah, okay. Now I get it. Now I can see how it works out. Armed with the self-appointed title, as we said, of personal attorney to the president, Cohen, who had been a personal injury lawyer, owned a taxi business, etc., managed to do what? Get major corporations, including AT&T, Novartis, and the law firm Squire Patton Boggs, collectively, to pay him over $2 million for advice about navigating the suddenly foreign terrain of Mr. Trump's Washington. Makes sense on one level, then it suddenly doesn't make sense, then you get a threat. Ah, now it makes sense again. Most of the arrangements remained secret until Tuesday, when details first appeared in an account released by Michael Avenatti. You know who he is. I don't have to read you the description. The New York Times confirmed many of Mr. Avenatti's disclosures through a review of financial records. On Wednesday, last week, additional details emerged. Novartis, the Swiss drug maker, said that it paid Mr. Cohen $1.2 million after he approached the company early last year, promising insights into Mr. Trump's views on health care. AT&T, which has been pursuing a major corporate merger, said it paid him $600,000 for advice on regulatory matters. Both companies also disclosed that they had been contacted last November by investigators for the special counsel, Robert Mueller, who is examining Russian interference in the 2016 election. Mr. Mueller's team also questioned a Russian oligarch linked to another company, Columbus Nova, a New York-based, allegedly, investment firm, allegedly, that had paid Mr. Cohen about $500,000 for consulting services last year, according to their financial records. The payments were among transactions totaling $4.4 million that between October 2016 and January of this year flowed through Essential Consultants, LLC, the same shell company Cohen used to pay Stormy Daniels. Cohen faces an investigation into his finances by the FBI, which raided his home and offices and hotel room last month. It's not clear what Mr. Cohen delivered for clients. One cut short his contract while another paid him even after concluding that he couldn't provide the services he promised. Mr. Cohen's dealings were the focus of intense questioning at a White House briefing on Wednesday when Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the press secretary, was asked whether the lawyer's business transactions embarrassed Mr. Trump and were contrary to his pledge to drain the swamp. She fired back, "I think that would be up to those individuals who make the decision to hire someone, just the way the companies that you work for made the decision to determine whether or not they think you're qualified to serve in a position." How do you like that one? Was he really qualified for those jobs that he was hired for? Well, I don't know. Are you? That's the press secretary of the President of the United States. Some of the contracts with Mr. Cohen were executed at a time when large companies and lobbying firms were scrambling to adjust to life under Mr. Trump. There is always some disruption at the beginning of a new administration as lobbyists with ties to an incoming president seek to profit and firms more associated with the opposition party recalibrate. But Mr. Trump's election shook K Street, home to many of the capital's lobbying firms, like an earthquake. It is interesting, too, as I'm reading through this, the idea of, a new administration comes in. You got to gain insight into what life is going to be like under Trump. And maybe for no other president in the modern era is it more true that, it was obvious what you were going to get. I mean, really, honestly, for half price, I'll tell you what you're going to get. Trump works on bribes. Praise him, buy his products, do things that he thinks will give him money, and he will like you. Problem solved. Do you really need to know anything else? He had pledged, Trump that is, during his campaign to stamp out special interest influence and came into office with few ties to established Washington lobbying and consulting firms. I suppose there could still have been idiotic people who believed, wow, what if he's going to do what he said he was going to do? Do we need to know anything about that? No, the answer is Trump is still Trump. He'll run everything now like he ran his businesses then. That is, grabbing as much cash as possible and telling you he's doing a fantastic job. This guy came into office with virtually no K Street constituency, which is virtually unheard of in the modern era, and so everybody was in a rush to hire people with connections to him, said Ivan Adler, a principal at the McCormick Group in Washington who recruits lobbyists. Squire Patton Boggs, one of the largest law firms in the world, has maintained a top lobbying practice in Washington partly by bringing in lobbyists with deep connections to the leadership in both parties. But the practice, which is run by former senators, John Breaux, Democrat from Louisiana, and Trent Lott, racist Republican from Mississippi, was not seen as particularly well connected to the Trump administration. But they did have plenty of racism, so that is a good news. Before entering into a strategic alliance, as they put it, with Mr. Cohen March of last year, the firm broached the prospect of partnerships with others connected to Trump. Beginning in December of 2016, the firm talked with a lobbying firm started by the former Trump campaign officials Barry Bennett and Corey Lewandowski, and with David Bossie, who had served as Mr. Trump's deputy campaign manager, among others, according to people familiar with the discussions. Unlike Cohen, the three men had extensive experience in politics and government. Bennett, Bossie, and Lewandowski, who did not end up working with the firm, declined to comment. People who worked with Squire Patton Boggs cautioned the firm against partnering with Cohen, predicting that his confrontational style and deal-making would bring unwanted attention, according to those familiar with the conversations. They said the firm ignored the advice in hopes that Cohen would be a draw for prospective clients. And, hey, who could blame them? It's just a bad business decision. I've told you about how that'll get most people off the hook plenty of times. Cohen brought in 5, quote, client opportunities, which is amazing because he only had 3 clients himself, between March 2017 and March of this year, when the arrangement was terminated by the firm, according to an internal email. The firm did not respond to requests for comment, but the email by its global managing partner, Frederick R. Nance, provided talking points intended to create distance between the firm and Mr. Cohen. It stated that neither our firm nor any of our clients is involved in the federal investigation of Cohen, and it described the firm's strategic alliance with Mr. Cohen as in keeping with our posture as a global multi-practice law firm with a premier public policy practice. That's lobbying. The identities of the clients brought in by Mr. Cohen were not specified, but one of them was a Florida company called U.S. Immigration Fund, LLC. Does that ring a bell for you? It helps facilitate foreign investments, according to court filings first reported by the Wall Street Journal on Wednesday. U.S. Immigration Fund has worked with the company of Jared Kushner's family to drum up, I would say, quote, investments. It just does it without the scare quotes. That, of course, the give us $500,000 and we'll get you a green card deal. Cohen remained largely independent from the law firm, Squire Patton, that is, during his year-long association with it, according to both internal email and court documents filed by prosecutors who were investigating Cohen. Among other things, Squire Patton Boggs did not have a key to Mr. Cohen's office, which was kept locked at all times. Mr. Cohen used his own computer server. Oh my goodness, his own computer server. What? Which was separate from that of the law firm. And weird. A large multinational firm that saw a potential ally in Cohen was also AT&T, which had a pressing reason to be seeking one. In late October of 2016, just weeks before Election Day, it had announced its intention to merge with Time Warner, whose television division includes the president's leading cable news bête noire, CNN. Mr. Trump quickly criticized the proposed deal, telling supporters at a campaign event, AT&T is buying Time Warner and thus CNN, a deal we will not approve in my administration because it's too much concentration of power in the hands of too few, which just tells me he didn't write that. AT&T, which has long-standing ties to the traditional Republican establishment in Washington, was not prepared for Trump to win, and there was little planning in place for his potential victory, according to three people familiar with discussions with the company. Its lead lobbyist through much of the campaign, James Ciccone, probably Ciccone, a Republican and one-time official in the administrations of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, broke with his own party to publicly endorse Hillary Clinton, yowza, in June of 2016. He retired a few months later, by the way. None of it boded well for a firm seeking approval of an $85.4 billion merger with a media company that the incoming president had publicly attacked, and that had various other matters pending in Washington. Soon, AT&T donated $2 million to the inauguration festivities and an additional $80,000 for telecom equipment used during the event. That might make a great jumping-off point. Let's see if this sums up anytime soon. Maybe we'll skim the rest of it and then use that jumping-off point. It was around that time that Cohen and AT&T officials first met, according to one person familiar with details. Cohen was in Trump Tower in Manhattan on the day in January of 2017 that AT&T's chief executive Randall Stevenson went there to visit with the president-elect. But the person, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that AT&T and Mr. Cohen did not meet then. Under the company's year-long contract, Cohen provided advice on how AT&T should approach the merger and various regulatory issues, according to a company note to employees. Which means nothing, of course. AT&T said Mr. Cohen was one of several consultants it retained at the start of Trump's term to help it better understand the president's thinking, of which there is none. Then the usual excuses. Then it's Novartis's turn in this article to offer its excuses for hiring Mr. Cohen, and none of them are very interesting. That gives us an opportunity quickly to jump over to this story from McClatchy. Robert McGuire, the reporter on this one, if everything checks out once I open it up. How do you like this headline? $1 million mystery gift to inauguration traced to conservative legal activists. And you know I've been harping on the inauguration fund, and I told you early on that it was easy to use as a slush fund, in particular because there were no reporting requirements about disbursements. You had to record all the incoming contributions, but you didn't have to report where the money went to afterwards. But this is on the incoming side. You have to report these things, but there are going to be plenty of people who use, you'll never guess, LLC shell companies to hide the fact that they're giving major contributions to this gigantic slush fund. Who would do such a thing? Robert McGuire knows. One of the largest contributions to President Donald Trump's inaugural committee in 2016 appears to have been orchestrated by a set of powerful conservative legal activists who have since been put in the driver's seat of the administration's push to select and nominate federal judges. And you know those judges suck. The $1 million inaugural gift came from a Northern Virginia company called BH Group LLC. LLC, you don't say. Unlike other generous corporate inaugural donors like Bank of America or Dow Chemical or AT&T. BH Group was a cipher and likely was set up solely to prevent disclosure of the actual donor's name. Almost nothing is known about the company, including who runs it or its reason for being, beyond writing a 7-figure check on December 22, 2016, almost a month before Trump was sworn in. While the source of the money used to make the gift was masked from the public, a trail of clues puts the contribution at the doorstep of some of the same actors, most notably Leonard Leo, an executive vice president at the Conservative Federalist Society, who have helped promote Trump's mission and that of his White House counsel, Don McGahn, to fill judicial vacancies as quickly as he can with staunchly conservative, preferably young, jurists. Oh, okay. Young jurists. I get you. Set up 4 months to the day before it made the donation. BH Group's address, as given in its Virginia incorporation papers, is a virtual office in Arlington, Virginia. The only person identified on the filing is a Donna Smith. That name, while common, matches the name of a longtime paralegal at the political law firm Holtzman Vogel Josefiak Torchinsky, whose Warrenton, Virginia office was listed as the Trump Inaugural Committee's main address on the tax return it filed last February. Warrenton, Virginia, not close. At best, an hour outside of D.C., a distant exurb, as they call them now. Holtzman Vogel is a Republican law firm known for specializing in creative legal maneuvers, that's nice, that allow donors to conservative causes to remain anonymous, at least to the public. In March, when a reporter tried to speak with Donna Smith about BH Group, Michael Bays, a partner at the firm, responded instead, saying, "We don't have any comment on client matters." Another connection to the BH Group was revealed in November of 2017, when a politically active nonprofit called the Wellspring Committee filed tax documents showing a $750,000 payment to the newly minted firm for, quote, public relations. Now, that's a substantial payment, particularly given that the BH Group does not appear to have marketed itself as a public relations firm. The group doesn't seem to have a website or any listings that advertise its services. Similarly, the Wellspring Committee is a notoriously secretive Virginia nonprofit with no demonstrable public-facing operations, no website for publicizing them, and only 3 employees. It's also not clear why a group like Wellspring would need costly public relations assistance. Its representatives did not respond to requests for comment on this story. The group only has a single board member, Neil Corkery, and almost all of its money in 2016 went out the door as grants to other conservative organizations or as payment to the BH Group. Wellspring was practically the sole funder in 2016 to the tune of nearly $23.5 million of the Judicial Crisis Network, a group that poured millions into stopping the Senate from confirming former President Barack Obama's Supreme Court pick in the last year of his term, leaving an open slot for Trump to fill. Legally, experts say there would be no problem with the Wellspring Committee giving $750,000 to the inaugural committee directly, or likely giving it to the BH Group for that purpose. It's not clear that straw donor rules apply to inaugural committees. Yeah, that could be a problem. Another thing that suddenly doesn't apply to the biggest slush fund in the world. How interesting. However, Wellspring's characterization of the payment might raise issues for the nonprofit if the check wasn't in fact for services rendered. If Wellspring intentionally misrepresented the payment on its tax filing, said Lloyd Meyer, a tax professional at the University of Notre Dame, that would, in theory, raise perjury concerns. The IRS, however, rarely pursues cases based on inaccuracies in an organization's tax filings. At the center of the convoluted network through which the inaugural contribution flowed is Leonard Leo, the executive vice president of the Federalist Society, one of the nation's most influential conservative legal organizations, to which some say the White House has outsourced its judicial nomination process. For example, when then Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch was asked how he came to Trump's attention, he wrote, "On or about December 2nd, 2016, I was contacted by Leonard Leo." That's how these things happen. Stephen Calabresi, a Federalist co-founder and board member, told The Hill last year that Leo's work offering guidance to the White House is solely in his capacity as an individual citizen. But helping him with this task, according to the New York Times, is lawyer Ann Corkery, the wife of Neil Corkery, the Wellspring Committee's president. Ann herself was president of Wellspring from its founding in 2008 until 2015. And so you can see that a very interesting web is revealed here. We don't have time to go through the rest of it, but that's all the basics. You're invited to read up on the rest of it and keep those names and people and dates and organizations in mind, as you probably should, as more and more of this unravels. It should be very interesting to find out why all this was done. And by the way, thanks for the tip, Rudy Giuliani. If you're going to make a donation like that, he says, funnel it through a law firm. And that's exactly what the Federalist Society appears to have done, and BH Group, for this purpose of hiding who did
From
what.
Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, thanks for listening. What did we miss in the meantime while we were covering all these stories? Justice Putnam will bring them to you on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Betsy DeVos's education department dismantled the team investigating for-profit colleges. And guess what? They're all getting off the hook now. And the White House can't explain anything about this Chinese financing deal.